Welcome to Artists, Icons, and Entrepreneurs, the podcast that dives deep into the stories of trailblazers who shape our world. With a career spanning over 50 years, David Velasco is a legendary figure in the world of professional hairdressing. A true artist and educator at heart, David has left his mark across every facet of the industry, from salons and stages to classrooms and camera lenses. David began his journey at just 16 in Tampa, Florida, before traveling to London to train under some of the era's most iconic stylists. By the age of 23, he had already become an artistic director with the John and Suzanne Chadwick team, styling clients at the famed Saks Fifth Avenue beauty salon in New York. Over the decades, David has held prestigious roles with Clairol, Shiseido Tokyo, and served as National Artistic Director for Wella for more than 10 years. He also led as Director of Hair Color Education at Bumble and Bumble, all while working as a freelance stylist for magazines, advertising, and TV. He's graced the main stages of Hair Color USA, Premiere Orlando, and the NAHA Awards, earning the Andy Award from the American Board of Certified Hair Colorists for Educator of the Year. He's also the author of the best-selling Trade Secrets of a Hair Color Expert series, now expanded into widely used educational video content. Today, David has returned to his first love, teaching haircutting, through his acclaimed online course, the Velasco Haircutting System, which includes over 50 hours of in-depth training. Now based in Florida with his wife and 2 daughters, David continues to inspire the next generation of stylists with passion, precision, and purpose. Please welcome to the podcast, the incomparable David Velasco.
Hey, David.
Hello, hi, Sue.
Good. Welcome to Artists, Icons, and Entrepreneurs. So, David, we're going to start with the first question. And, you are a wealth of information. So I don't think we'll have enough time on this podcast, but we're going to go through some of the things in your career. You started back in Tampa at the age of 16.
Yeah.
And you traveled all the way to London. You studied under world-renowned stylists. What impact did that early international experience have on your career and outlook?
Lulu, I think it really has everything to do with my career. It really set the tone, I think, for my career. What I mainly learned was professionalism, really be a professional behind the chair. And I learned how to teach, which was important. I was able to work with the Chadwicks at a very young age. And the Chadwicks taught me how to become a teacher. I mean, I was a teacher before I even had a big clientele, if that makes sense. Yeah. So, and also, back in the 70s, everything sort of neat and groovy came out of London, so it was such a cool place to be. So it really set the tone for everything. And also I met some incredible, amazing, hairdressers of that time, you know what I mean? And, it was just everything. I worked at a very nice salon on Kings Road. I couldn't work. Well, do you know anything about the Glenby company and all that?
Mm-hmm.
Glenby and Southern Latch Works. Okay, so they worked with the Glenby company. And my brother, I had an older brother who was a hairdresser. That's how I got involved with the business. So he was a Chadwick trainer when they first came to the United States. And they sent him to London to open a school for them. And that's how I ended up going to London. But I worked for Glenby in London because I didn't have working papers. So I had to work in a private salon.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Because I was illegal. I wasn't illegally there, but I couldn't work. So I actually got hired by a small salon on Kings Road who paid me cash under the table. And so I worked there as a hairdresser. But because my brother was setting up the school for the Chadwicks there, I was able to sit in on the classes and how to teach classes. And I learned how to teach. And I learned advanced haircutting skills. And I learned how to do a slide presentation. And I learned all that stuff. So every time that I wasn't in my salon, I was at the school learning from them. Does it make sense?
Yeah, definitely.
Of course.
Well, that opportunity was like golden,
Yeah. Well, and I guess the thing that strikes me is that I remember this, you were 23 when you were the artistic director with the Chadwicks team. And then you came back to the States and were working at Saks Fifth Avenue. And I think that this is so impressive to me, being a mother, a grandmother, and a great-grandmother, that at such a young age, you were able to balance a career like that. I mean, that's just working at Saks.
Yeah.
It's kind of a high-pressure thing. But then to be on the team with the Chadwicks, what do you think you learned about, balancing things at such a young age?
Well, I was so young, and when you're young, you have so much energy, first of all, I mean, I would work all day and then go out dancing all
Yeah.
night. I mean, drag it at 5 o'clock in the morning, get up and do it all over again, here's the thing. The salon at Saks Fifth Avenue was owned by Seligman and Latz.
Yes.
And the Chadwick School, which was only 2 blocks down the road on Fifth Avenue at 666 Fifth Avenue, was also owned by Seligman and Latz.
Yes.
You see what I'm saying? Because the Chadwicks in those days were employees of Seligman and Latz.
Sure.
So as a SNL, Seligman and Latz
Yep.
employee, I was able to work at the salon at Saks Fifth Avenue and work at the training center as well.
With them.
Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah,
Mhm.
sure.
And they were literally like just across the street from each other. I mean,
Yeah.
across the street, like 2 blocks down. So, I mean, sometimes I work half a day at the salon and half a day at the school and vice versa. And I also travel a lot during that
Yeah.
because I was a trainer for SNL. I was a trainer for Glimby to begin with. And then we all defected Glimby and went to work at Seligman and Latz.
Yeah.
And with Seligman and Latz, I mean, they would send me all over the country, all over the United States and Canada,
Yeah.
teaching at their SNL salons.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Mhm.
So
Yeah, and-
that was a lot of traveling there as well.
And maybe for our audience who are non-hairdressers, because we do get non-hairdressers, the 2 largest department store chains were Glenby.
In
and
SNL.
They were both based out in New York, and they were in every major department store
Yeah.
in the country. I think at one time SNL had something like salons.
Yeah, they have
Yeah.
upwards of 2,000 salons.
Yeah.
See, the thing is, like, what people don't realize is, like, like in the late 70s, in the late 60s, right? Like, I got into hairdressing because my older brother was 5 years older than me.
Yeah.
And he was a hairdresser. And he started off in the 60s, the big bouffant
Yeah.
hairdos and all that
Yeah.
stuff. But at a very young age, he moved to New York City. And his first job in New York was the beauty salon at Bergdorf Goodman.
Yeah.
And Bergdorf Goodman was the Glenby salon, all right?
Mhm.
So I was going to become an architect. I know that's one of your questions. I'll jump with your gun here a little bit, but I was going to become an architect. I mean, I went to all through junior high school and high school, I took architectural drafting classes. But the summer between my junior year and senior year in high school, I went to spend the summer with my brother in New York City. So from Tampa, Florida, a Tampa boy, what I'm saying, 15 years
Yeah,
old,
yeah.
I went to New York City to spend the summer with my brother. And by then, the Chadwicks had started working for Glenby, and the Chadwicks were employed by Glenby to put together an education program to teach at all of their salons all this new cutting and blow drying thing that was going on. Because it was like a revolution going on those days in hairdressing. So they wanted to train a whole bunch of young hairdressers how to cut hair and blow dry hair, as opposed to doing roller sets and stuff like that.
Yes.
So my brother, being a young hairdresser in those days, was one of their very first trainers ever. He was what they called an eggman. For some reason, they called these young trainers eggmen. They weren't all boys, they were girls, of course, but they were called eggmen for some reason. But anyway, so my brother was a trainer for the Chadwicks. I was 15 years old, had no idea to become a hairdresser. But I came to spend the summer in New York City with my brother, and he had to work, of course. I was there for the whole summer. So I would hang out a lot of times at the salon at Bergdorf Goodman with him. And when I would go to the salon and see these beautiful girls walking around, and they're
Yeah.
playing great music and the vibe of the salon. And
Yeah.
it wasn't like the bouffant hairdo days. It was now
Right.
the, cut and blow dry, and they're wearing jeans and playing rock music and, shag haircuts and all that.
Yeah.
And man, I just got bit like the bug so bad. I'm like, I need to do this. Like, this is what I want to do. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, I hung out at the salon so much that summer that the manager of the salon put me to work like folding towels and stuff like that.
Yeah.
He just said, you can hang out here. You might as well, do something and
Do
pay you for
something.
something, Yeah, do something. So, I was like folding towels and filling shampoo bottles and stuff like
Yeah.
that. But so my plan was to, what, I'm going to become a hairdresser and I'm going to move up here and work at Bergdorf Goodman with my brother. Like, that was like my plan. So I went back to Florida. I came back home to Florida, and I told my father that I wanted to become a hairdresser. And my father was fine with that. My father was very supportive with everything. But he was like, okay, first thing, you have to finish high school, which wasn't a problem because truly you have to have a high school diploma to get a hairdressing license anyway. I was going to a vo-tech school learning drafting classes. I was doing 3 hours a day of drafting classes. And they had a cosmetology school at that school. So I tried to transfer. They wouldn't allow me to transfer because I was a guy. So no boys allowed in the cosmetology class.
Oh.
So I ended up quitting day school after 11th grade and finishing high school at night because they started adult education at that time.
Mhm.
So I would go to
Mhm.
night school for my senior year, like 2 nights a week, 2 or 3 nights a week. And then during the day, I went to cosmetology school.
Yeah.
So I went to cosmetology school and high school at the same time. when I turned 17 years old, I graduated from high school in June of that year. That would have been 73. And the very next month, July of 73, I became a licensed hairdresser in the state of Florida at 17 years old. So that's how I started so early. While I was in school, you're going to find this hard to believe, I know. While I was in school, while I was in beauty school still, just halfway through beauty school, my brother says, look, I'm doing a class. Why don't you come up and attend our haircutting class? So I went to New York and took advanced haircutting classes with the Chadwicks when I was 16 years old. I wasn't even I wasn't even a licensed hairdresser. I was still in beauty school. And I learned the Chadwick system of cutting hair, the bobs and the layers and everything. I mean, I was there. It was a week-long class. So I took a week-long class and I was so into it. And let me tell you something, that being that I took all those years of architectural drafting classes, when they started talking about holding angles and elevation and degrees, that all made sense to me perfect.
Yeah.
I mean, it totally clicked with me. You know what I'm saying? It's like, I mean, because some of the people are sitting there going like, I don't know what the hell they're talking about. And I'm like, I totally get this. I totally get it.
Yeah.
So I came back to Tampa, to my beauty school, Tampa Beauty School, and I started teaching my instructors how to cut hair. I taught them the haircuts that I learned in New York. I swear, it's a true story. And so that's how it started, So as it turned out, I finished beauty school. I worked in Tampa for maybe like about 6 months. And then like the Chadwicks, like I just said to you a minute ago, sent my brothers to London. So my brother called me. He's like, hey, you want to go to London with me? I'm like, sure. So that's kind of how that worked. So I went to London with Danny. I worked in a salon. I learned how to teach. All that stuff was great. And then they wanted him to stay there like longer. They wanted him to stay there for like another year. But I wanted to get back to the States. My plan was to get back. So the only problem is I was broke. I had a great time, but I didn't make any money. So I came back to the States, and I ended up coming back to Tampa, Florida for about a year. I worked at a Glimby salon, and then we moved over to SNL. I worked at one end of the shopping mall, the Moss Brothers department store salon for Glimby. And then when we defected Glimby, I went across the mall to the other end of the store, the other end of the mall to Robinson's department store, and started working for SNL. And I worked there for about a year, I guess. And then I just said, you know what? I have to get to New York. It's either now or never. I was 21 years old at that point. I mean, I was in London at 18 years old, right? So I was like, where? So at this point, I was about 21 years old. And I said to myself, David, you got to go. This is it. You got to go now. And that time my brother had come back. He was already back in New York. And so, so I got into contact with the New York corporate offices. And I said, I want to move to New York City. I said, can I get a transfer or something? Because I was working at SNL salon in Tampa. And they're like, oh yeah, of course. We'd love to have you up here. When, where do you want to work? We have Saks Fifth Avenue, Bloomingdale's, Lord and Taylor. And they started naming these like stores they had in Manhattan, So I had my pick of it all. So I figured, start at the top, So I went to Saks Fifth Avenue. And that's how I went to Saks. And then we opened the school, the training center at in the corporate offices at SNL, which was at 666 Fifth Avenue. And so that's how all that started. Was that too much information?
No, not at all. That's great. That's great. So, David, you have worked for companies like Clairol, Shiseido in Tokyo, and Wella and you were the national artistic director for 10 years for these companies. Is that correct?
For Wella for 10 years, yeah. I worked for all of them, like you said, but I was for Wella for 10 years, altogether.
Can you tell the audience what lessons did these roles teach you about leadership and creativity?
Lulu, the most important thing I learned from working in those places, because I had a lot of creative training with my hairdressing stuff. But I have to say, I think the most important thing I learned from working in those companies is business, because like I went to high school. I barely finished high school. You know what I'm saying? I was like not a great student, academic. And then I went to beauty school. And so I love the creative side of it. But when I went to work with these companies, I learned about like business, like about how to manage a big budget, how to run a division of a, I mean, I was in charge of the Wella Corporation, the Wella Shows and Education Department. I started off there with a $2 million budget under my jurisdiction. By the time I left, I had a $10 million budget under me. So I had to learn about budgeting. I learned about marketing and sales, especially, of course, hair color, how to market, how to sell hair color. I learned about how to put together education programs to teach to large audiences, I don't mean hairdressers. I mean, I would remember Jackie Easterling? Could you remember Jackie?
Yeah.
Well, we would work together and put together education programs to teach a group of about 200 Wella educators. These were Wella employees,
Mhm.
So it was like train the trainer type stuff.
Yeah.
So the organization skills, the business skills, the whole idea between marketing and sales, which I never, knew any of that
Yeah.
stuff. I was a creative guy. I wasn't like a business guy. So
Mhm.
I learned a lot, and I learned really fast. Like, you better get a hold of this, Velasco, or they're going to throw you out of here, So I would say, I would look at it this way. Like, you know what? I didn't go to college. So I think working with those companies was kind of like my MBA, like my personal
Yes.
business
Yes.
administration course.
Mhm.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
Because I
Yeah.
learned all that, and that helped me a lot in running my salon and stuff like that. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying, too?
Uh,
Because,
yeah.
my wife always say, you know what? You make a lot of money, but you can spend the hell out of it too. So they got to have her because
For a
she's the one that she
hairdresser,
can.
and you did.
You know what? I'm a big picture guy. Like I don't want to deal. That's like we had with our salon. My wife ran all the like stuff behind the scenes. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Mhm.
Like paying the bills and doing payroll and taxes and all that stuff. I always say, if it wasn't for her, I'd be in prison today because
Yeah, I know.
I'm like, let's just have a fun time and let's throw a big party. And
Yeah.
Christmas, Christmas is
Yeah.
coming. Let's have one big
Yeah.
dinner party.
Mm.
And she's like, well, do you know what the water bill was last month? And I'm like, no, but that was fun. Working in those companies, I learned a lot about that kind of stuff. So that gave me the balance. So I have my creative side with the Chadwicks and with the teaching, with the photo shoots and hair shows and all that. And then I had my business side,
Yeah.
that I
Mhm.
learned from that. That's kind of how I see that.
Great.
David, when you're just talking about your experiences starting out so young, being from Florida, going to London, New York, and I look at your resume and it makes me think of that old preacher that used to be on TV and he used to say, God has a plan for your life. I just one little piece of this would be a story, and it's so rich because you also then went on to work at Bumble and Bumble, which is just known for its innovations and its
Yeah.
product, and it kind of did a whole nother spin in the salon industry. How did that chapter of your life maybe change your approach to education?
Well, I think the interesting story there, if you don't mind me saying, is how I ended up working at Bumble and Bumble. How that
Mhm.
came about in my
Yeah.
life. I think that because what happened with there was I was working for Wella, as I said. And
Yeah.
after a certain number of years, so when I first started working at Wella, my job as the artistic director was about 20% administrative, the office and all
Mhm.
that stuff, budgeting, and 80% creative. I mean, hair shows and photo shoots and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But
Mhm.
over the years, the hair color, the shows and education department was the department that I ran.
Yeah.
As we grew and got more and more staff members and the budget
Yeah.
increased, whatever, my job started shifting the opposite direction, like 80% administrative, 20% creative. I would have
Yeah.
to hire hairdressers to go do photo shoots and stuff like that for
Yeah.
Wella because
Yeah.
I just couldn't do it anymore. That started rubbing me the wrong way after about 7 or 8 years.
Yeah.
So I decided, I had back in my mind to maybe get back into a mainstream salon. Well, about that time, just out of the grace of God, like you said, Lord has a plan, because let me tell you, I never planned this in my life. One day I get called to a meeting at Wella, and we're going to meet with this guy named Michael Gordon, who was the
Yeah.
owner and founder of Bumble and Bumble. And
Mm.
Michael Gordon wanted to do some photographic work for Wella because he was also a photographer. And he also wanted to convert his entire salon over from L'Oreal to Wella. Mario Argenti, who was the president at that time, that was like a big coup for Wella to get Bumble and Bumble away from
Oh, yeah.
L'Oreal. Was
Yeah.
a big deal. So they called me into the meeting to be part of the meeting. So I was there, a few other people. The whole plan was laid out. And then Michael says, here's the thing. I have, he only had about, which I was amazed, only about 8 hair colors at that point. He had like 100 people cutting hair and like 8,
Yeah.
no, he probably had 60 or 70 people cutting hair at that point. And he
Yeah.
had like 8 hair colors. And he says, here's the thing. My colorists are doing, I forget how many millions of dollars worth of
Yeah.
color every year. And
Yeah.
he says, and they don't want to switch over from L'Oreal to Wella. You know, Lulu, how that works, right? Once they learn the color line, they're like, I don't want to change. I don't care what you do. So they were very scared to switch over. And he was afraid because he's like, they're going to screw up heads here. And I don't want that to happen.
Mhm.
So Michael Gordon told the president of Wella, Mario Argenti, I want to do this, but I want David Velasco himself to personally come into my salon and spend 6 weeks working with my colorist and helping them with this conversion over to his new product line. Now, that wasn't part of my job. My job was to
Right.
teach. I taught a team of educators, educators that would go to the salon level to do what we call transitions and stuff like that.
Right.
But because it was such a big account, Mario Argenti says, Velasco, would you do it for me, man? Come on, do this for me. Like privately, because I'm like, Joe, I don't want to do that. So anyway, a long story short, I agreed to do it because it was a big, big deal. So I spent 6 weeks at Bumble helping him with this conversion. I mean, we literally transferred over like 1,000 hair color formulas. You know what I'm saying? I don't know. It's like a lot.
Oh, yeah.
And of course, besides that, teaching his colorists, doing like color education classes for them on how to use the product. So I did that for 6 weeks. And while I was there, that bug came up as like, you know what? This is such a freaking fun place to work, and I miss that salon energy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
Yes.
the music and of course, at Bumble, you got fashion models and movie stars and everything else. And it was so exciting to be there in that environment that I thought, it's time for me to leave Wella. And like I said, Wella had kind of gotten to the point of being kind of boring for me because it became very administrative. So I thought, okay, what I'm going to do here was that I decided to make a plan and to go to Michael Gordon and offer him an idea. And that idea was this. I said, look, you have a huge haircutting department, and your hair color department, quite frankly, is dismal compared to your haircutting business. And the reason because of that is because you yourself, Michael Gordon himself, was a very well-known hair cutter, and he built Bumble and Bumble as a strong hair cutting business. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Through the 70s and the 80s, hair cutting was everything.
Yeah.
But now, in color, believe it or not, Bumble and Bumble was a 3-story building, and he had hair color department in the basement.
Oh, wow.
I mean, and it was horrible. I mean, it was like you walk into Bumble, the ground floor, and there's loud rock music, and there's pretty girls, and there's all this kind of good stuff going on. And to get your hair colored, you went down to the freaking basement, which looked like a basement.
Yeah.
It was like going to the subway. It was like going down to the subway,
Yeah.
had big subway tiles everywhere. And this is horrible. So Michael Gordon, like I said, he was also a fashion photographer. And on the 3rd level of the building that they have in New York, the whole floor was a big open loft they used for photographic work. And he had huge skylights up there. And I said to him early on, I said, Michael, that 3rd floor should be your hair color department. And hair color, and I just kind of explained to him, he knew this, but he didn't want to admit it. I think that the whole industry started shifting because everything was about hair cutting in the 70s and early 80s. By the mid 80s, hair color started becoming very, very strong. And when I first started doing hair, like you, Lulu, I know, it was all about natural color. We did haircuts like shag haircuts and all that, but color was not a big deal at all back in those days.
Yeah.
Only old ladies and prostitutes colored their hair in those days.
Yeah. Yeah.
To cover the gray hair, prostitutes to become like a, bombshell blonde or a redhead. So I said, you got to build the color business here, and I can help you build the color department. That's what I can do for you.
Yeah.
I can come here. I can train your staff, how to do, because here's the thing about his staff. They were good colorists. Please don't get me wrong. They were nice people, and they were good colorists. They were making a lot of money, but they really did not understand hair color theory.
Right.
They knew the formulas that worked for them. They knew how to do beautiful foils, impeccable foils and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Impeccable. But when it came to real hardcore theory, like color correction and stuff like that, they were really in bad shape.
Yeah.
So I said, here's what I can do for you. I said, I can put together a hair color education program, hair color education program for your team here. And more importantly, put together a program to teach the juniors coming in. And within 5 years, we will have 15 to 20, maybe 30 hair colorists in that color department going strong. That was the plan that I said to him. And he turned around to me and he said, well, the first thing he said to me was, what's Mario going to say? Mario Argenti was president of Wella. He was a great businessman, and I learned a lot from him, a lot from Mario. But he was a strong, like, CEO type, you know what I'm saying? Like a real, and Michael knew that. And Michael's like, well, plus Michael didn't want to ruin his relationship with Wella. You know what I'm saying? Because I'm taking Wella's artistic director away from them. So I said to Michael, I said, you don't worry about that. I will take care of Mario. Because I said, here's the thing. I'm ready to leave Wella. And rather you hire me to do this or you don't, I'm still going to leave. Because I also knew Garen DeFazio, Garen at the Plaza. And knew, I knew a bunch of other hair, Carmine Minardi and I have been friends for, 100 years, So, I mean, I had other salons that I can go into. So anyway, I told him that I would explain to Mario and explained that I came to you. You didn't try to steal me, that whole thing. And so he said, okay. He said, well, let me ask you something else. And I said, well, he says, how would you just like to run the entire color department? Because I thought I'd be an educator, you know what I'm saying? And like be like one of the colorists. But he basically wanted me to run the entire color department. Here's what had happened. There was a wonderful colorist that worked there for many years, and his name was Tony. His last name was like Lagrigrio or something like that. I'm not quite remember his last name. But Tony was a very well-known colorist, and he was quite famous. He did a lot of work for like, Vogue and Bazaar and stuff like that. But Tony had recently passed away when I met Michael. So Tony was the leader and the figurehead of the color department.
Right.
But Tony died, and you had these other colorists who were good colorists, but they weren't like standout people. You know what I'm saying? They weren't like leaders. They weren't like figurehead people. So Michael wanted that kind of a person in the color department. So he asked me if I would be interested in doing that. So I'm like, sure, why not? So that's what happened. So, but this is what happened though, is so Michael, he says, fine, you talk to Mario Argenti though, you sort it out with him first, and then we'll go from there. So I did. So I went back to Mario. I told Mario what my plan was, and he was really upset with me. He was really upset. He's like, I can't believe that you want to leave, Papa. I've been so good to you. I said, look, it has nothing personal, Mario. You've been great. There's nothing personal. I simply am bored doing this kind of work now. And I explained to him, all the details. And he understood. And then he says to me, Velasco, let me propose something else to you. They call me Velasco. Nobody called me David. In fact, that Bumble and Bumble, nobody knew my name there for like 3 years. They all called me Velasco. Bumble and Bumble, Michael Gordon had a rule there. He says, nobody here can't have the same name as somebody else because it makes confusion in the booking everybody. So he says, so what do you want us to call you? And I said, well, David's my name. He says, no, we'll call you Velasco. So from here on out, you're Velasco. Well, I was there for like 3 years. Nobody knew my first name. But anyway, Mario Argenti called me Velasco too. He says, so Velasco, here's the deal. He says, I really don't want you to leave. I think you do a phenomenal job for us, but I see your point. And he says, and I can also see an advantage of having you work at Bumble and Bumble. So he said, what if we split your job up? I'll hire somebody as kind of like your assistant to do all the administrative stuff that you don't want to do. And then you'll continue to do the hair shows and do classes, do the big events for us and photo shoots and stuff like that. And as it's kind of like you still be the artistic director, but you'll be paid as like a consultant as opposed to a employee.
Right.
So I went back to Michael Gordon, and when I said, of course, I said, let me think about it. So I went back to Michael, New York, and I'm like, okay, this is what happened with Mario, because I didn't expect that at all, because I was figuring out to cut ties with Wella completely. So I went back to Michael, and Michael was like great with that. He's like, I got that. That's great.
Yeah.
He said, because it was like, look at it this way. Wella can say, we have the head colors at Bumble and Bumble as our artistic director. And Bumble could say, we have the head educator from Wella running our color department now. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I'm not trying to pat myself on the back. Don't get me wrong, or blow myself up. I'm just saying that's kind of how that worked out. And it worked out well. And the other thing is I liked it because I wasn't full time in either one. I did this a few days a week. I did that a few days a week. I did that, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And all that. Yeah. And I'm going to tell you something that you're really not going to believe. So I did that. So I worked at Bumble. I worked at Wella. I was still the artistic director. I juggled all that. Okay. And now here's the part you're not going to believe. In the middle of all that, my wife and I opened a salon in Pennsylvania.
Oh my God.
Okay.
Oh my God.
I think the question there is why?
Well, here's the thing. Okay. So my wife and I were living in New York City, of course, like 20 years, 25 years. But along the way, we had bought a country house in Pennsylvania, right? We lived in Greenwich Village. We lived in the same Greenwich Village apartment all those years. But we wanted to buy a little house in the country to get away on the weekends. Let me preempt this by a second. We had a sailboat in Connecticut that we would sail in Connecticut too.
Yeah.
So anyway, so we ended up buying this house in Pennsylvania in the middle of the woods in Bucks County, which is a beautiful area of Pennsylvania. And I can be from my apartment in New York City. I can go under the Holland Tunnel, across New Jersey, and be in our house literally an hour and a half. So it could be from the middle of Manhattan to the middle of Bucks County country. You had 10 acres in the woods in an hour and a half, right? So once I got to Bucks County, I realized, wow, this is a beautiful area. And there was a beautiful community there called Doylestown, which is the county seat of Bucks County. Very affluent. And you're like literally 45 minutes north of Philadelphia, an hour and a half west of New York City. Very affluent area, very sort of cosmopolitan, and no good hairdressing. I mean, right? I mean, they had like 4 or 5 old lady beauty parlors, and they had like a couple that were a little bit more contemporary, but still nothing good. So I said to my wife, you know what, let's open a salon here. So my wife was like, when do you have time to do a salon? And I'm like, I don't have time, but I also don't want to keep traveling so much and doing all the stuff I'm doing. At some point, I want to try to stop doing all that craziness and be closer to home. That was kind of like my thinking, you know what I'm saying to you?
Yeah.
Because besides working at Bumble and working at Well, I was traveling too. You know what I'm saying? Doing hair shows. Lulu and I were traveling. We were in Las Vegas and we were all over the place.
Correct.
Yeah. And of course, just to make this put a cherry on top of the cake here is we had 2 kids during that time too. So I became a father. So yeah, so the salon in Pennsylvania the idea was this. We got a small space, only 4 chairs. We got a young lady who I knew from the area who started working there as our first employee. And I was literally there like, first of all, I opened the salon and didn't do enough. We didn't even do a first haircut there for 6 months. We got the place, we got it decorated, we got it beautifully done. And because I was working so much with the other stuff that I've been telling you about, we didn't do the first customer there for 6 months. After 6, as a matter of fact, the landlord called me one day. He said, "Can I ask you a question?" He's like, "Yeah, sure. What?" He's like, "I have nothing personal against you." He says, "I've been in your place." He had the landlord, right? He had an office across the street. He and a lawyer there in our neighborhood, they were like partners in the place I was renting. So I had that key to my unit, you know? So he's like, "I went into your place and it looks beautiful. You set up this beautiful salon." He says, "But I haven't seen that one customer go in or out of it." So I think he thought that I was like laundering money or something. So I explained to him, I said, "Look, here's the deal. I am so busy with the other stuff that I'm doing but I felt there was the opportunity was good. I liked the space. I didn't want to lose the space. And at some point in the near future, I will be there and we will be doing hair out of there. I guarantee you that." But that's kind of what the deal was. So that's what happened. So my wife actually, who's not a hairdresser, but my wife used to run a business for a costume jewelry designer in New York City. So she's really good about running businesses and money and all that stuff. So she basically went in there and started running the business, and I was there literally like 1 or 2 days a month at the beginning. And then as time went on, I was there a little bit more. Then I would train a hairdresser, then another hairdresser and like that. So at one point I had 3 jobs in 3 different states. Okay. I was head of colorist at Bumble and Bumble in New York City. I had my office at Wella still at the Inglewood, New Jersey. I had an office at the Inglewood, New Jersey corporate headquarters. And I had a salon in Pennsylvania. So I had 3 different businesses in 3 different states. I also had an apartment in New York City, a house in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, and a 36-foot sailboat in Essex, Connecticut. So do you think I had a crazy life for a while? It was wild. It was crazy.
I identify.
So I kept all the balls juggling to finally, I just started, I can't keep doing this. So we got rid of the boat. First, we got rid of that boat. We bought others, but that's another story. We got rid of that boat. And then I slowly, spent more and more time at the salon in Pennsylvania because I knew that was going to be my future. You know what I mean?
Right.
And started building that up. And then after I did this whole thing with Well and Bumble together, I did that for about 3 years. And then after about 3 years, I said, okay, enough. I just didn't want to go out and do that anymore. And I felt I really wanted, my girls were born, my girls were getting older. I wanted to spend more time at home, stuff like that. So I quit Wella altogether at that point, and I focus on I focus on my salon. And then after a while I went from like working at Bumble like 4 days a week to 2 days a week and then whatever. And then finally I told Michael, okay, that's enough. And by the time I left Bumble, just by the way, I was at Bumble I think altogether about 8 or 9 years. By the time I left Bumble, I had done what I said I had done. We had 25 hair colorists up and running. Oh, I didn't tell you this part. While I was working at Bumble, remember I said to you that he had the am I talking too much?
No, go ahead.
He had the photographic department on the 3rd floor, his big photo studio with the beautiful skylights. Well, while I was working at Bumble and had only been there for about a year or so, we had a major fire. Bumble and Bumble had a major fire. The whole thing burned out. He had an office up there where his studio was, and he had a big copy machine there. And over the night, that copy machine somehow caught on fire. And the entire building, it's a block, block building. So the building was still standing there, but the entire interior got burned out. So Michael found, this is a miracle. He found this really old salon in New York, this really big old salon. Because we have like 100 employees. Yeah. And it was one of these big old salons that was really famous, like in the 60s, like in the 50s and 60s, with the French poodles on the wall and stuff like that. Yeah. And it was still open, but there was only literally like about 5 old hairdressers working there. But it was this huge place, and it was able to accommodate all of us. This was a miracle, and it wasn't that far from where we were. It was right, I can't remember the exact address, but it was near where we were. So he rented that whole place out, and for like a year and a half or something, literally all the hairdressers, we went to this burned out building to try to get whatever we can. I remember loading up garbage cans full of hair color tubes and stuff like that, whatever we can salvage.
Yeah.
Because what the fire didn't destroy, the firemen destroyed, you know what I'm saying? Because
Yeah.
they tear up everything and the wall water. So I remember we just walked literally all this stuff, all of our equipment that we can salvage to this other salon. So
Wow.
we set up there. And so my point in this story is that while that was happening, Michael called me one day and he wanted to meet with me in his office. I went to Michael's office. He says, your dream is going to come true, Velasco. I'm like, what dream is that? He says, we're going to put the color department on the 3rd floor, just like you wanted to do. And he said, I want you to design it for me. I don't know how he thought that I was a designer, but I mean, I did take some architectural class, like I said earlier. So I did. So we designed the whole thing. He did have architects, of course, real architects do stuff, but I kind of get some ideas, But, we had like, drop fed tubes for drop fed tubes and a big open air mixing laboratory, we called it, and modular stations and the skylight redone. I mean, everything. It was beautiful. What we built, I mean, as a matter of fact, I have pictures of it. It was in, once it was finished, it was in Architectural Digest magazine. It was so beautiful.
Wow.
Yeah. So anyways, like I said, so Wella went first, and then I got rid of Wella work. And then after a while, I kind of weaned down on the Bumble and Bumble stuff when my salon started building up. You know what I'm saying? So I would say by early 2000s, I was like pretty much out of Bumble and working in my salon full time. And by my salon, by the way, I was in that small space that I told you about for about 3 years. And then we were busting at the seams. So we ended up getting another space that was like 4 times the size and 4 times the rent. And so I went from a 4-chair salon to a 9-chair salon, but I would have like a double shift coming in. I had like, because there's the other thing. What happens at the salon that I had, like this lady she has got children at home that can work 3 days a week and you work 2 days a week and you work. So I had like double shifts going on.
Oh, yeah.
It was a lot, but it was good.
What a story. What a story. So in all this mix, you wrote several books, a series of books called Trade Secrets of a Hair Color Expert. And I had those books and for a long time, I would give them to all the new employees that would come in.
Oh,
those for them to read. Now I can't find them. And I tried to find them. I looked high and low for them. And I know where I got, who I gave them to. But anyway, that's another story. But I love those books.
I have a spare set. If you give me your address later, I'll send them to you.
Thank you. Well, Trade Secrets of a Hair Colors Expert has become a bestseller when you wrote it.
Thanks.
And, and for any hair colorists out there or any cosmetologists out there, please get these books. They're something to give for your employees to look at because it's information that is relative now.
Okay.
So can you tell us what inspired you to write those books? And then they became educational videos later.
Yeah. Well, first of all, let me say this because of what you just said to your audience here. This is important. The books aren't for sale now anymore.
God.
Yeah, but what happened is that they're kind of a little bit for sale, but this is what happened. My book titles, that business of mine, that Trade Secrets that are correct for brand, was bought by the Product Club, which is another story I'll get into in a few minutes if you want. But Product Club bought it. They sold my books for a long time. And finally they said, you know what, we want to do some educational videos on how to actually do hair color. And we want we want your education, your theory to back up what these people are doing. You know what I'm saying to you? Because Lulu, you know what? I teach theory, right? I teach hair color theory. I don't teach like how to do weaves and balayage.
Right.
I don't teach technique.
Yeah.
I mean, I have done many years ago at hair shows and stuff. But my idea of those books was you can be I always thought, look, you can be the greatest foiler in the world, the greatest balayage person in the world. But if you don't know how to formulate color, it's still going to look terrible. How you mix color is what's important. So anyway, what happened with that was this. After I left Bumble and left Wella and all that kind of stuff, I thought, you know what? I really had the idea I wanted to write a book on hair color theory because I still don't believe that hair color is taught properly by the manufacturers. I felt that I had a unique perspective on how hair color should be taught. And what I mean by that is this. I worked behind the scenes at these, with Clairol and with Wella. I mean, I don't mean just like a hair shows. I mean in the laboratories, testing salons, where they test these products, all that kind of stuff. So I was able to ask these chemists, questions and pick their brains and really get a background about what makes hair color really work. Okay, that's number one. And then number two, so I had a perspective from that point of view. And then I had the perspective of the other point of view of somebody who does it behind the chair every single day of their life. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Yeah, because manufacturers were like in an ivory tower in a laboratory making a product and saying, okay, this is how you use this product. So, because that's what I do it behind the chair and I'm not getting the results you're telling me that I'm getting. Okay.
Exactly.
I know what you're telling me, but the
Mhm.
results that I see is not what that deal is. Okay.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
so I felt I had a unique perspective. That's why I wrote my book series based on that. Because, for example, just to give you, I don't want to give you a color class here, but just for example, I don't believe the color wheel works the way people say it works. You know, I mean, like the whole neutralization of color,
Yeah.
like that's BS. That doesn't work. You know, if somebody's hair is green, you can't put red and green hair and have it be brown. You put red and green hair, you get darker green. You know, you have to eliminate the green, right? You have to get rid of the green first. You
Yeah.
know, so so the color wheel, the way it's been taught all these years, doesn't work. The level system, in my opinion, the way it's been taught doesn't work. You know, they have, say, well, you can use this hair color, this tube of color here is going to give you 5 shades of lift. So people think they can take somebody from a level 4 to a level 7.
Yeah.
You know, that's going to be beautiful. Well, no, you can't. It's going to be an orange head.
Yeah,
You know what I'm saying to you? Like, I'm just giving you those 2 ideas, but there's a lot of those kind of things that I call them hair color myths. They don't work. And I can prove to you that they don't work. And every time I do a hair show, everybody like, Lulu, you're nodding your head going like, yep, I know what you're saying. When I do a hair show and there's 300 people sitting there, I'm telling them this. They're going like, yeah, you're right. But nobody ever told me that before. Right? So I came from that point of view of like, I'm going to give you like, you know, I'm not a chemist. I'm not going to give you, you know, scientific formulations on the molecular structure of hair color. I'm not going to do that. I don't know that stuff. I'm going to tell you what works and what doesn't work, you know, and you can take it for what it's worth. And that's how I did. So the book series, Lulu, getting back to your question about how I came about writing those, I never planned to write 7 or 8 books on hair color. My idea was to write 1 book on hair color, 1. And so I just started typing, started typing away and brain dumping everything. I mean, I'm talking like what I call the nooks and crannies of my day. And like on the lunch, if I had a few minutes of lunch, just scribble some questions down. At the weekends, or if the kids were out playing, or, we were on vacation someplace, I'd be on the beach with a notepad. And so, I would type all these things. I mean, I literally typed out every single thing, and I'd never typed in my life, I typed out every single thing. And when I thought, you know what, I think there's nothing else for me to say. Like I thought, this is it. Like, I can't think of anything else that I know about hair. I mean, everything I know about hair color, from Wella, from doing it behind the chair, from whatever, I put in this thing, along with some charts and diagrams and that kind of stuff. And then one day I printed it all out for the first time. And when I did, I had over 700 pages of information. And I mean, like, it was like a lot. So I'm like, okay, what am I going to do with this? So what I did was I went to like, Kinko or one of those places, and I ran off like 5 copies of this, 3-hole punch, and one of those big loose leaf binders. The big 3-inch loose leaf binders?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. I had like 5 of those made up, and I sent them to different hair colorists around the country that I really respect their opinions, and friends of mine. You know what I'm saying? I have so many friends in the industry. I mean, that's the big deal about this industry. So like I sent one to Beth Minardi. I sent one to Dee Levin down in Philadelphia. Somebody out in LA. I can't remember her name now. I can't. Anyway, I sent like 5 of them out. And I waited for the response because I just want to know, do you think this is valid? Do you think hairdressers would learn this stuff in this way? So here's the overwhelming response that I got back was this. David, the information is phenomenal. Everything you say, everything I've read here is right on point. But I don't think hairdressers will read it because it's so intimidating. It's like this thick and it's like so scary. I said, and that's kind of, they all kind of said it their own way, you know what I'm saying? But that was the basic foundation of that. That's what it was. So I knocked that around for a while. I thought, what am I going to do with all this information? And then I had this brain fart one day. You know how you wake up in the middle of the morning, you go in the middle of the night? I woke up in the middle of the night going like, take each chapter, make it into its own little book, like a module, you know what I'm saying? Like this one's on redheads, this was on blondes, this was on great coverage. Because each chapter, there was like 7, I think there was, the original set was either 6 or 7. The original set was, I think, 7 modules, 6. And that's what I did. So I kind of retooled the wording a little bit, did an ending and a beginning, that kind of stuff, and made them like freestanding books. Got that so far? So that was how I did that. But they weren't like numbered, like they weren't like they are now. They weren't numbered. They were just like, one's on redheads, one's on brunette. And then I had people asking me questions that weren't in the books. And these were really elementary questions. These were like, how do you read the color label? Like the labels on the color, like, what's the difference between a 5BR and a a 5/G2, whatever it was, you know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Because I realized, there's conversions going on. You had the American level system, the European level
Mhm.
system that had to be sorted out. You had what's the level and a tone, so like
Mhm.
my point is that I kind of wrote these books assuming that they would know a certain amount of stuff of hair color theory and kind of take it from there. And reality is that, and then I should have felt this too, because I never learned nothing about color in school. These kids are coming out of school knowing nothing about color. So we had to take it from square one, So my point is, like, after writing these initial 7 books, I guess it was, I went back and wrote one that was, what I call Hair Color 101, the beginning. And that took it from, you can be like a plumber and read that book and start learning how to color hair. You know what I'm saying? So you don't need to have any education at all in hair color, right? So
Right.
so then I went back and wrote that one. Then after I wrote all that, I looked at my whole series one day. I said, there's one really, really glowing admission here. And that is that I don't say anything about coloring African American hair. And the funny thing is, I've colored African American hair. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I never professed to be an African American total stylist, but I definitely have done it. I didn't write anything about that. And their
Yeah.
texture requires a different technique in a lot of things that they do, a lot of things that are done.
Yeah.
So I felt that I have the theory behind that, but I didn't have really enough. I wanted more solid information about that particular topic. So I met a man named Paul Chambers at one of the the thing that the summit, the hair color summit Lulu they used to do in Los
Yeah.
Angeles. So I met Paul Chambers a couple of times. We had some discussions about it. He and his wife have a salon in Chicago, very nice salon in Chicago, and he does color. He's a big colors. He uses Chromatics. Chromatics is a boutique hair color line owned by another friend of mine named Tom Dispenza. And so we started having these conversations. And long story short, we teamed up and did another module another book together about coloring African American hair. Okay.
Wow.
So that's kind of how the series came about. And then I went and I numbered them. This is number 1. Learn how to read this first. Hair Color 101 beginning. And then number 2 was how hair color really works, which is basically the fundamentals of really hardcore hair color theory. Number 3 was all on gray coverage. And then we got into, redheads and brunettes, blondes, all that kind of stuff. So that's how the series came about. And it kind of grew organically. And I'm telling you what, I sold, man, a lot of books all over, hair shows, online. I mean, I built my own website to sell it.
Yeah.
Sell them. I sold them online. I sold them at hair shows. And then, then a small company. You guys know the Product Club company? You ever heard of that company, Product Club?
No.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, they make foils and gloves and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
Lulu, do you remember a girl named Mary Albanese?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Mary Albanese was she was the marketing department at Wella. Okay, she was like a junior marketing person at Wella. Well, after I launched years after I launched my books, and they were very successful, and I was teaching all these hair shows all around the country, teaching at these shows, I'm at one of these shows one day and I run into Mary Albanese. And I'm like, oh, Mary, hug and kiss, whatever, what are you up to? And she says, well, David, she said, I work for this company called Product Club. I said, what's Product Club? She says, well, we sell gloves and foils and all this kind of stuff. I said, oh, that's great. And then she says, but I've been intrigued when I heard about your book, so I wanted to talk to you about something. She says, we started doing some educational videos. Mary had the idea. She took the idea to the owner of Product Club at the time and said, let's put together some videos on how to do like a balayage and the foils and stuff like that, because that education will help sell, the foils and the gloves and stuff, right? So she says, so we have these videos that we teach technique on. We have nothing on hair color theory. And I think your books would be a great combination to sell with these videos. So again, let's make a long story short here. I met the owner. The owner flew me to Mexico. They're having a big thing in Mexico. I did a presentation to the whole Product Club organization down there. And right away, the owner says, let's partner up here. So I gave Product Club the licensing rights to sell my books. Okay, to use some of my content for the stuff they were doing. And we had a good deal. So they sold my books. I sold my books. They were promoting me. You know what I'm saying? It was all a real nice thing, right? Sure. So that went off about 4 or 5 years. And one day, the owner of Product Club, Eric, his name was Eric Paluski or something like that. Eric called me one day at the salon. He says, Velasco, he says, I have some news for you. He says, I'm selling this business, the Product Club business. I'm selling Product Club to the Burmax company. And your books are part of the deal. And I said, who's Burmax? He's like, Velasco, sit down. You ready for this? He said, Burmax is one of the largest beauty supply distributors in the country. He
Mhm.
says they are what's known as a master distributorship. They
Yeah.
manufacture all the stuff you buy, like,
Yeah.
everything from
Yeah.
chairs to tables to,
Yeah.
mirrors to shampoo,
Yeah.
everything. Anyway, long story short, he explained everything to me. And he says, but here's the thing. He says, Burmax is the largest seller to beauty schools in the nation. They sell to over 5,000 beauty schools. Their Burmax catalog, I don't know if you've ever seen it or not, is
Mhm.
about that thick, and it's about 9,000 things in it. And everything in these beauty schools, everything from the chairs to the mirrors to the products they use, the combs, it's everything, the kits,
Yeah.
those big kits, Burmax makes them.
Yeah.
So I'm like, wow, this could be good. So that's how I got hooked up with Burmax.
Yeah.
And then Burmax eventually, after selling my books for years and then all the rest of the stuff that they were doing, they wanted to buy my entire series.
Oh.
And that's that story. Is that too long of a story for you?
No,
No.
that's great.
Yeah.
That's
But
great.
it makes me want to circle back, maybe on a little bit of a lighter note, but you've done all this stuff, David. You've
Yeah.
been all over the world. I know you've done, NAHA Awards and Premiere and Hair Color USA and all the international shows. Now, if we were not doing a podcast and we were just normal hairdressers sitting down having a cup of coffee or a drink, we'd be telling road stories. David, we'll hear a couple of your favorite road stories, because I know they'll be really good.
Well, I think one of my favorite stories, is happened about mid-90s while working for Wella, about 92 or 93. And we were doing Hair Color USA. Okay, Hair Color USA. Remember that one down in Miami,
Mhm.
Florida?
Yeah.
Okay. And Leland Hirsch, rest in peace. He just
Mhm.
passed away, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But Leland Hirsch and Jesse Briggs teamed up and did an amazing event. Did you guys ever go to that Hair Color USA?
Oh,
in
yeah.
Florida?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so you know what it's like. Okay. All right, so we were going to do Hair Color USA, which we had done every year. They were doing it. And, I was working for Wella. So as you remember, how it worked was the manufacturers had classrooms. There were like 9 hair color manufacturers.
Mhm.
And the first 3 hours of each day, it was 3 days long, but the first 3 hours of each day, the audience would rotate, right? Like they'd be in the Wella classroom for an hour,
Mhm.
then they go to the L'Oreal classroom, then they go to the Schwarzkopf class, you know what I'm saying? So
Yep.
every hour they would rotate. Remember that? That was in the morning. And then the afternoon, the main stage presentation took place outside with all the, models and all that. So I was in charge of the Wella classroom. And of course, you only had like 55 minutes to do a class.
Yeah.
So you couldn't do any real hair color. So basically, what we did and all the other manufacturers too is you give a 55-minute commercial for your products. You know what I'm saying? This product and that product and how to use it and blah, blah, blah.
Mhm.
So Jackie Easterling and I, she was in charge of education. We're doing the show together. We had put together a really nice slide presentation. Remember slides and the disc and the
Mhm.
trays of slides? Yeah. So we had put together a really great we thought it was great, slide presentation to do at this event. And of course we could do the same slide presentation 9 times, right? 3 times,
Yeah.
3 classes or the classes would rotate. So we're going to do the same thing 9 times in a row. So we get to Miami and start unpacking boxes. Because if you remember that show, you got tons of giveaways, right? Like
Yeah.
tons of samples and bags. And so we had tons of crap,
Yeah.
like Wella bags and tote bags and product and samples and whatever.
Mhm.
So we're unpacking all this stuff. And I said to Jackie, I'm like, where'd you put the slides at? Slide tray. A box with a slide tray with all of our slides, our presentation. And she's like, didn't you pack it? And I'm like, no, did you pack it?
Oh my God. Oh no.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
Oh.
We were,
Oh. Yeah.
I thought
Yeah.
she had packed the slide tray. She thought I had packed, it wasn't going with me. It wasn't going
Yeah.
in my luggage or anything. It
Yeah.
was going down with all this Wella gear that we were saying down.
Yeah.
Well, she thought that I had packed it, and I thought that she had packed it. And neither one of us had packed it. We left it on my desk in New Jersey.
Oh my God.
So we're panicking. We're literally, it's like 6:00
Yeah.
in the evening. The next morning, we're going to have 300 hairdressers sitting in front of us, staring
Yeah.
at us, waiting for a presentation. We have nothing to present. Zero.
Oh my God.
Could you imagine the panic? Not only that, not just that, knowing that
Yeah.
you're going to do that 9 times, knowing that we're going to
Yeah.
rotate
Yeah.
that class 9
Yeah.
times. Oh, my God. I was so panicked. I'm like, what the heck are we going to do? So we called, all our Wella team together, and we're like kind of brainstorming. We're like going nuts, like, what, and there was some idea, this idea. And you could wing it. I mean, we could have products there. We could have held a product and stuff. But
Yeah.
having the slide presentation that we had was so impactful. It was going to be, really nice, And then I had this like idea. I said, okay, here's what we're going to do, guys. I said, all we're going to do is simply answer their questions. So Jackie looked at me like if I had like three eyes. She said, what are you talking about? Answer their questions. I said, you know what? We're just going to answer their most pressing hair color questions. And it doesn't have to be a Wella question. No matter what hair color line you use, what do you want to know about hair color? And she said, Jackie says, that might work. And I said, it's going to work. Let me tell you what we're going to do. So I got the hotel. Hotel has those big pads on easels, those big flip chart pads, right? So I got a big pad on the easel with those magic markers, right? Put it on the little platform in the front of the stage. And I said, Jackie, I'm going to go with the microphone because we have 300 people in the audience. We have the PA thing,
Mm-hmm.
So I said, I'm going to go through the audience and field questions. You write the questions on the thing. When we get about 10 questions on here, we'll stop asking questions and we'll start answering them all, right? And that's exactly what we did. And I'm telling you, it was so successful.
Yeah.
I mean, we literally just said, look, here's guys, we're not going to, we use it to our advantage. Look, every other classroom here is going to try to just like give you a commercial on their products. We're not going to do that. I completely flipped the script, I said, we're not going to do that here. We don't care what product you use. I don't care if you use Wella or L'Oreal or Schwarzkopf or Fermese or Goldwell or whatever. All of you in this room have hair color questions that you want answered. And we're going to answer those questions in this hour. So who has a question? Raise your hand. And that's exactly what we did. I went through, I feel the question, the microphone, so everybody in the audience could hear the question. She wrote it down. We didn't answer it just that. We wrote them down, listed them all down. Then we stopped and we literally went through, and Jackie really was really good with that too. I mean, Jackie, I have to admit, she was really good with that hair color theory. I mean, even more so than me, because I was more of the hair color artist side of it, where she was more like the hardcore theory behind the thing, So we answered each one of those questions down the way. And then if we had any time left over after that, we'd ask for more questions. And we just kept doing that until the end of the class. And then as she wrote the questions down, she'd write very large, maybe 5 or 6, 5 questions on a pad. We tear them up and we got masking tape. We put them along the walls, right? And then the next class, then an hour later, the class would rotate. Our new class would come in. They saw some things hanging on the walls. They didn't know what to expect. We did the same thing over and over. Okay. But here's the thing. As the classes went on, see, everybody was supposed to rotate. And they had like a number or something. So they knew a class there was supposed to be at a certain time, So they were literally supposed to leave our classroom to go to the next classroom. But what happened was some people would say, I don't want to go to the next class. I don't care about going to L'Oreal or to I want to stay here to hear more questions. So as the time went on over the course, and then of course, after like day one and kind of these people started talking at dinner and whatever at the night, by the next day, our class was jammed, packed. And we would say like, we're only supposed to have 300 or 200, whatever people are here. That's all we have cheers for. There were people sitting on the floor. There were people spilling out into the hallway with these big double doors in the back of the room. I'm telling you, I swear it is a true story. We had the packed, people were telling me, said, Dave, you can walk down the hallway. A lot of these classrooms were like empty, or they'd have like 10 or 12 people. And we had like 400 people in our classroom every time.
Wow.
And with every class we did, we tore those questions off. Of course, a lot of them were the same type of questions, you know what I'm saying? But, we took it anyway. We put them on the walls. And at the end of it all, we had a tremendous event. And at the end, they have a banquet dinner the last day, the last evening of the show. They have a big banquet event where they give away like trophies and awards and stuff like that. And I have a picture of this. If anybody doesn't believe me, just send me an email. I'll tell you. I have a picture of Leland Hirsch and Jesse Briggs giving me a big plaque because our Wella classroom won the best education classroom by a manufacturer that year. And so from nothing, from pure air, from pure nothing to like doing the best classroom, I thought that was a pretty good thing. That was fun. And you want to know something else? The end of the show, the whole thing finished, right? One of the Wella girls that was like like an assistant type helper there. She started going to those big flip chart papers that are all hanging on the wall as masking tape, and she started ripping them off the wall. And I'm like, wait. She said, I said, don't you rip, boss. You take them off gently and you fold them, you give them to me.
Yeah.
And she looked at me like, oh, you're a jerko, aren't you? I took those things. This is true. I took those things and I put them in a box or a bag or something somewhere. I took them home and I kept them for years.
Yeah.
And then when years later, like I'm gonna say like maybe, that was probably in the early 90s, by the mid 2000s, when I thought about writing my book, I pulled those things out and they gave me a lot of great ideas for writing my book because I said, this is the questions that hairdressers really want the answers to. That information gave me the basis for my books.
Yeah. Well, David, that goes to show you and the audience that you are a pro.
Thank you
Are a
so
pro.
much. Thank you.
You know how to take something as a diversity and make it an opportunity for everyone else.
Yeah.
So I wish we had more time, so we're gonna have to invite you back. But before we leave, and before Sue starts her rapid fire questions, I want to ask you. You are now focusing on haircutting education, and it's called the Velasco haircutting system. Can you tell the next generations of stylists why you came up with this and why you think it's so important today?
Yeah, well, absolutely. Yeah. Well, back when I started cutting hair as a hairdresser in the early 70s, and you guys, the same thing, hair cutting was the big deal, right? The color wasn't important back then, but hair cutting, again, we were going through that transition, right, from the big bouffant hairdos to precision hair cutting. We learned hair cutting, what I call hair cutting systems, okay? Like I learned, because I was, my mentors were John and Suzanne Chadwick, right? And I learned the Chadwick hair cutting system. And by learning that system, believe it or not, I still use it. I learned the hair cutting system that allowed me to cut any haircut I ever wanted to cut my entire life.
Right.
Right?
Foundation.
I mean, the shag came out, and then the sauvage came out, and then now it's the wolf cut. They're all layered haircuts.
They're all the
layered
same thing.
Right? Right? They're all layered haircuts. So once you know how to do that, you got it. And the same thing with bobs, the same thing. So I decided, look, let me show you something. Do you know what this is?
Yeah, this is my lady's book.
Look how thick it is. This
Wow,
is the textbook that beauty schools use.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you know how many pages it has? Over 1,000 pages. And it weighs about 8 pounds. Maybe it's 5 pounds. And do you know how many pages are dedicated to hair cutting in that? 19. And do you want to know something else? Out of 19 pages, they're mostly all big pictures.
Yeah.
This is a shag hair. This is a layered haircut. This is a bob haircut. So it tells you kind of what these haircuts are and some diagrams of a stationary guide and a traveling guide. They're like illustrations, but it doesn't teach you how to do a haircut. It doesn't teach you even how to cut a bob. So when I was young, I learned a haircutting system that allowed me to cut hair for my entire career, as you guys did. That's not what happens today. Today, thousands of kids, even my own daughter, I don't know if you know this or not, my youngest daughter went to beauty school. She's a licensed hairdresser. She went to beauty school. She became a licensed hairdresser. She doesn't do hair anymore now. That's another story that I won't get into right now, but she's working online and she's very happy. That's all good. But my daughter was graduated from beauty school with honors. She was an honor roll student in cosmetology school. She got out. I asked her to give me a trim one day, and she said to me, "Dad, I don't know how to cut hair." I'm like, "You don't?" I tried $20,000. I wrote a check for $20,000 for beauty school. And I said, all I want is a little trim. I don't want nothing special. And it's like, trim me up a little. Dad, I don't know how to cut hair. And she was, and like I said, it's not her fault. Thousands of kids every year are coming out of beauty school not knowing a single thing about hair cutting or color for that matter, but that's another stuff. Okay? So I had them back in my mind for many years. I mean, I'm going back many, many years. I thought about doing this kind of a thing a long time ago, but I never had the time to do it. With all the stuff and the salon and, as all stuff I've been talking to you about, I never had the time to do it properly. But, as you know, a few years ago, I closed my salon, moved to Florida. I didn't semi-retired, I guess you can say, because I quit doing hair behind the chair, but I still have been very involved with the education end of the business. Anyway, I had the time. I had the space to do it, the location to do it properly, the lights and the camera and all that stuff. And I decided to do it. But here's the thing. So thousands of kids, young people are coming out of beauty school every year, not knowing how to cut hair at all, period. You also have a lot of hairdressers who have been doing hair for any number of years. I mean, a lady just emailed me the other day. She says, "I've been a hairdresser for 17 years, and I never really felt I understood hair cutting well until I started going through your course." So it doesn't have to be just beauty school kids. I'm talking about people who have been doing hair for many years who never really had a good foundation on how to cut hair. So you have kids coming out of school, no education at all. The other end of the spectrum, you have some people that are very well-known hairdressers. I mean, like, Nika Rojo, who I've known for many years.
Yeah.
Nika Rojo, Vivian McKender. They're really well-known celebrity hairdressers who do teach online classes, but they're like $2,000. Okay? So what happens is these kids can't afford that. Unless they have rich parents, they can't afford that. So what happens is these kids end up going to YouTube and binge watching hundreds of haircut videos that have no relationship to one another. You know what I'm saying? One guy's telling you to cut hair dry. One guy's telling you to cut hair wet. One guy's telling you to over direct. The other guy says don't over direct. One girl's saying this is how I cut my own hair here. And it's just all like that. And these people are trying to learn how to cut hair by watching just random haircut videos They have no relationship to one another. There's no system. And a lot of times people do say, oh, it's my XXX system. And if you watch 2 or 3 of their videos, you realize there's no system here. They're just randomly doing haircuts.
Right.
Okay. So, and I do have a system. I mean, when I opened my salon, I mean, I had my system when I learned with the Chadwicks, over the years, of course, I've kind of changed it and I've refined it. And I've tuned it. I'm saying I've done things differently. I don't do things the way I did them 50 years ago, obviously. But my point is that I had to develop a system to teach my staff members how to cut hair, because I would hire these kids out of beauty school, or in a lot of cases, I would hire hairdressers that have been doing hair for 5 or 8 years that still, in my opinion, couldn't cut hair to the level that I wanted to cut in my salon.
Correct.
Right? I know, Lulu, I know you can relate to what I'm saying here, right?
Yes, yes,
Okay?
yes.
Right. So I literally had to teach every hairdresser ever worked for me, and there were a lot of them over the 30 years I had my salon in Doylestown, and plus I had a salon for 10 years in Manhattan, with Carmine Minardi, and we had a partnership for many years. But anyway, I literally had to teach these hairdressers one-on-one how to cut hair from square one. Okay. So over the years, I've developed a method for doing that, and it's very simple. It boils down to a very, very simple concept. And that's this: hair can only be cut 3 ways. I don't care who you are. I don't care what your name is or what country you come from. It's going to be one length. It can be layered. It can be graduated. That's it. There's no other way the hair can be cut. Now, there are many variations within each one of those segments. But once you learn a technique, a method for cutting those 3 haircuts, and you simply will learn some variations or alterations that you can cut any haircut you could ever want to cut. So based on that premise, I made my hair color course, the Velasco hair cutting system, to follow that exact pattern. So what I did, and this is what I did with my staff members, is we'd get a mannequin head, and we're going to start out with a bob, one length, right? Then we go shorter, then shorter. Then we do a little bit of A-line bob, shorter in the back. Then more of an angle, then more of an angle. Then we do a graduated nape line, then shorter, short. Then we do bangs, blunt bangs, sparse bangs, spiky bangs, wispy bangs, all that, right? And you do that, and we end up getting 12 out of one head, right? Mannequin head. And plus, mannequin heads when I was in school were $20. Now they're $200. So we do that. So we do that with the one length cuts. And then we do the same thing with the graduated cuts. And then we do the same thing with the layer cuts, right? So in my hair cutting course, I say, look, to do the full course, first of all, there's 56 haircuts in this course, step by step. They're not 15-minute videos like YouTube has. I'm telling you, every step of every haircut is its own little, in other words, in one haircut, we'd have 8 little videos. You know what I'm saying to you? First, we're cutting the bangs this way, then we're cutting the back this way, then we're cutting, and the whole idea was that you get your mannequin head on the stand and you cut hair with me. Okay? Watch the first lesson, cut what I'm doing. You follow exactly as I'm doing. You can just watch them if you want, but it's much better if you cut along with me. That's the theory behind it. Got it? So we do that. So the first 3 mannequin heads are exactly what I just said. One length, graduated, and each lesson builds upon the other. So I always say, follow the sequence. Don't jump around here. Okay? One length haircuts, graduated haircuts, layered haircuts. And once you know that, you know my complete system. But now I have 3 more mannequin heads, and whether that's going to be cutting curly hair, how to use the Velasco system on curly hair, which is the same techniques, but because curly hair is curly, you got to make allowances for that. Curly hair, coily textured hair, which is like African American type hair. So that's cutting hair, those 2. And then the third one is using the Velasco technique for razor cutting. How to use a razor. So some people go well, all your, I want somebody to say all your haircuts are all done with scissors, but I'd like using a razor. Well, I'm going to show you how to use a razor. It doesn't matter. You can cut hair with, as far as I'm concerned, you got to use broken glass. You can use a broken piece of glass if you want. It doesn't matter to me. The system stays the same. Right. So that's the premise behind it, Lulu and Sue. I just, what I'm saying is basically I felt there's a need for that. Oh, and by the way, it doesn't cost $2,000. Presently I'm selling it for something like just under $300. It's like $289 or something. But if you're a student, I have a form that you can download and have your cosmetology school fill out, send it to me once I confirm that you're enrolled in a beauty school or a barber school, because a lot of barbers now are learning what might have got females' hair. If you're an enrolled student, you get a student discount, which is a third off of the price of the class.
That's
really
great.
good.
That's
Yeah.
great.
And so I figured, look, you know what? $200, if they want to really learn, let me tell you, I spent thousands of dollars on my education. And I did not come from a wealthy family. You know what I'm saying? I came from a very, I would say lower income family, but I'm like, I don't care. I won't eat because I want to take that haircutting class.
Right.
And let me tell you, there were no haircutting classes in Tampa, Florida. I mean, I had to go to New York City. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
I mean, I would fly anywhere to learn something like that.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's different world today, so whatever. And all the online stuff is a big deal. So I got the whole thing online. Besides the videos, there are downloadable PDFs, you know what I'm saying? They have study guides and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that was kind of premise why I wrote it. And so far, it's only been 3 months. I only launched it not even 3 months ago. And so far I've had tremendous response from it. I mean,
Yeah.
people are going,
That's great.
you know,
That's great.
it's like, so it's good. So I think it's all good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what else
Well,
we got going?
Yeah. Well, David, our audience enjoys this thing we do called rapid fire because
Okay.
really they not only want to know about the work and your body of work over the years, but they also like just to know insight. Because I always say, if you want to know the best restaurants, best place to shop, the coolest things, you talk to a hairdresser. You know this.
That's true.
People want to know what does the expert hairdresser have to say. So I'm going to ask 5 rapid questions, and I'm just going to ask you to answer it as quick as you can. Give us the top first thing that comes off of your head. There's a couple maybe you've already answered throughout our conversation, but I'm going to ask them anyway. You ready to go?
Yep.
What's the one thing people would be surprised to know about you outside of the fact that you're a hairdresser?
That I'm a sailor. I'm a
Yeah.
sailor. Sailboats is my addiction is sailing for many years. I always say sailing is my mistress, you know.
Yeah.
She takes all my time and all my extra time and all my extra money. I don't have a sailboat at the present time, but that's another little story. But funny because I was raised in Tampa, Florida, and I never set foot on a sailboat till I moved to New York City. You know, I mean, when I was growing up in Tampa, friends of mine had fishing boats and ski boats and stuff like that, which never really excited me. But when I moved to New York and I was working with, as you know, John Chadwick, John and Suzanne. John Chadwick had a little sailboat that he kept in New Jersey, and Susie didn't like sailing. She hated sailing. So one day he says to me, "Hey, Velasco, you want to bring your girlfriend down?" Well, my wife and I, we'd lived together for many years before we got married. So he's like, "You want to bring you and your girlfriend down? You and Cindy," he called her Cindy's. "You want to bring Cindy down? You guys want to come sailing with me one day?" So I'm like, "Yeah, sure. That sounds fine. Sounds, okay." So we went to this little marina in New Jersey, and we got on his boat. It wasn't a big fancy boat, a small sailboat, very nice little sailboat. And we kind of put the motor on, we putt out of the marina, and I'm going like, what's so exciting about this? I don't get it. And we get out of the marina. When we got out of the marina, he puts the sails up, turns off his motor, and the wind piped up, and all of a sudden we go zooming across the bay. Oh my God. I was like, I couldn't believe it. It was like being on a magic carpet, it was like zooming. And have you ever been sailing on a sailboat like that? Yeah. You know what I'm talking about then. No stinky motor going on. I mean, quiet and just elegant. And we're just like flying across the bay. And I was bit by a bug. I can't tell you. It was like hairdressing bug. It was like, to me, it was like when I got bit by the hairdressing bug. I looked at my wife and I'm like, I have to learn how to do this. This is amazing. John, like I said, his wife didn't like the sail. So once he realized that we really enjoyed it, he invited us down a lot. And it got to the point to where at one point he and Suzanne wrote a book called The Chadwick System, which was like for consumers. And they had to go on a book tour. They had to do the Merv Griffin show and all this kind of stuff. And he said, Velasco, just go down to the marina and use the boat whenever you want, So I did. So to make a long story short, I learned sailing like that. And then over the past 45 years, I've owned 6 different sailboats in 4 different states. I've owned 6 different sailboats and sailed my wife and I together sailed all over, first of all, the Northeast, because we're living in New York City. So we sailed like, Long Island Sound, all of the Long Island Sound. And then we moved to Pennsylvania. I got a boat down the Chesapeake Bay. So we sailed all over the Chesapeake Bay. And my big dream was to take the last boat we had was like the best. I mean, it was a liveaboard boat, so we could have easily lived on that boat. I mean, we did live on it for like, long weekends and stuff like that, but vacations and stuff. But my dream was to take it down to the Caribbean and take my own boat down to the Caribbean and spend some time sailing around the Caribbean. I had spent time in the Caribbean and doing hair for TV commercials and stuff like that, but I never sailed down there. So that was my dream, but that didn't happen. Both had some different health issues and stuff. And then I thought, Velasco, if you're out in the middle of the ocean and you get a freaking heart attack or something, that's it. Because my wife couldn't handle a 38-foot boat by herself, And just
Yeah.
would just been stupid to try to do that. So
Mm.
so anyway, long story short, that didn't happen, and we ended up saying, let's just go to Florida, so that's what we did. So now we're here, but sailing is my big it has always been my big passion besides hairdressing.
I think I know the answer to this next question, but if you weren't a hairstylist, what other career do you think you would have chosen?
Architect.
Yeah. You covered that before.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I
Like I
can
said earlier, I was
totally
in that,
see how that relates to haircutting. That makes
Yeah.
perfect sense to me. Yeah.
Yeah, I started taking when I was in 7th grade, they're like, okay, you have to take an elective. So I'm like, okay, what's my choices? They said, well, shop, which is like woodworking, shop, which like all that noise and sawdust and stuff. T, which is like the military thing,
Yeah.
something to do with the military. And I'm like, that ain't not me either. And then they started drafting. And I'm like, what's drafting? How do you no idea what drafting was? So they're like, well, it's mechanical drawing. You learn how to do like build, draw houses and stuff like that. So I'm like, oh, that sounds like fun. Okay, I'll do that. So I did that. So totally, I had no clue what that was at all.
Mm.
But I had this amazing teacher. He was the first African-American teacher to work at the school that I was working at. His name was
Wow.
Mr. Allen, and he was a phenomenal guy. I was so addicted. He got me so into drawing those, mechanical drawing,
Yeah.
that I stayed with him for all 3 years of junior high school. And then
Yeah.
in high school, like I said, I went to like a Vo-Tech school. So I was
Yeah.
taking 3 years of architectural drafting classes a day. And then I would go to my academic classes to draft. So yeah, architecture. What I did do, just to finish this thing out really fast, is, because it's always been a passion of mine. 1999, original house that we had in Pennsylvania was in the country. There was like a small wooden house. We tore it down and built a huge, beautiful house. And I drew the original blueprints to that house. And, I drew the original blueprints, and they were, for the house. And then when I went to get a construction loan, they wouldn't give me a loan because I'm not a licensed architect. So I had to give my drawings over to the licensed architect, pay them $10,000 to redraw my drawings, and we built the house. But yeah, that was,
Wow. Cool.
So I always wanted I always wanted to build my own house, what I'm saying, and draw, design it myself. And I did. So that was that.
So this is Lulu's favorite question. In the morning, when you're getting ready for a creative day, coffee, tea, or something stronger?
For me,
Yeah.
no, in the morning, coffee. I just drink coffee. I'm a coffee person. I'm Cuban descent. I'm Cuban descent. I'm Cuban descent. So I gotta have my café con leche first thing in the morning.
Yeah.
I'm a Cuban. Café con leche in the morning. The café con leche, right?
Yeah.
Got coffee
Yeah.
with the,
Yeah.
the café con leche in the morning, and a little bit before I go to bed at night.
Yeah.
And my wife used to do the same thing, but a few years ago, my wife was like, she's like, I can't drink coffee at night anymore because it keeps me awake.
Yeah.
But you know what? We can go out. Sometimes we go out. We're always going out. We're always going out. We don't stay still at all. As a matter of fact, I always wear my daughter out. My daughter's 30 years old. She's like, Dad, you guys don't stay still, man. But we'll be out someplace, partying or whatever. And at 2:00 in the morning, we'll find a coffee place to stop and have coffee, And I can go right to
Love
sleep
it.
with it. But yeah, café con leche is like my thing.
You're talking about your daughter.
Yeah.
Daughters, you have two, I think.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite family tradition that you do with your wife and daughters?
I don't know if it can be called a tradition or not, but maybe it is, I guess. I've always felt it was really important to take at least one great family vacation a year. Like really get the kids together and, no school, no work, and just go away someplace together as a family. I mean, to me, like memories are made on vacation. You know what I mean? I mean, you're taking photographs, you take videos, and those are the things that the kids remember growing up. The other thing, the best things that Cynthia and I always think about, is like, remember in Mexico when this happened, or remember in Puerto Rico when that happened. And so I don't know if that's a tradition or not, like you're asking about.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't have like a real like Christmas type of a tradition or something like that.
Yeah.
But that's always been important to us.
Yeah.
And so along those lines, I mean, I had to do hair in Mexico one time for a hair show at the Chadwicks back in the early 70s. I mean, excuse me. Yeah, that would have been like the early 80s, I guess. Late 70s in Mexico City. And I met a lady there who was a Clairol employee. Her name was Graciela Echeverria. And we became personal friends. And long story short, thereafter, I ended up buying a town. Clairol made a deal with me. They said, look, we're going to go take you down to Mexico. You're going to do a hair show in Mexico City, big, huge hair show, 3-day event. And I was a big headliner, the guy from New York City. And I was a Chadwick team member. Now, Mexico, I'm not kidding you. They said, we're going to send you to Mexico City for a week. And then we're going to send you to Monterrey, which is the capital of Mexico, do the same thing, and then Guadalajara. But between Monterrey and Guadalajara, you're going to have a week gap because the way the schedule worked out. He says, so we're going to send you and your wife, or my girlfriend at the time, to a resort in Puerto Vallarta for a week.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So I'm like, I was a kid. I was like 20 something, 22 years old or
Yeah.
something. And they're like, we're going to do it. I'm like, really? I said, yeah. And my Spanish is really bad. They said, you speak Spanish, right? I said, well, I speak okay. I can understand it pretty well because I was raised in a Cuban family, but I haven't spoken Spanish since I was a kid. So it's really not very good. So they sent me to a Berlitz school in Manhattan, to a Berlitz special school. Yeah, they sent me to like what they call a total immersion education class, where I had like an executive course on how to speak Spanish. But they did give me a translator on stage and all that stuff anyway. But my point in the story is that when I went down to Mexico and we were there for like a month, because like I said, Cynthia and I were in Mexico City, then Monterrey, then Guadalajara, and of course Puerto Vallarta, which is beautiful. We ended up buying we ended up going back, not in that trip, but another trip there. Soon thereafter, we went back to Mexico and we ended up buying a timeshare down there. Yeah. People complain about timeshares all the time. Complain about timeshare if you buy it and you don't use it. But we used it, and we used the heck out of it. We traded it, and all that kind of stuff. But long story short, we still have one down there. We've had a timeshare in Mexico for 40 years. And like I said, over the years, we've traded it. We've gone to different countries, different places and stuff like that. But we've always taken a great family vacation. And I think that's important.
I do too. I do too.
Yeah.
So my last question, David, is after 50 years in the beauty industry, what still excites you about the work?
I have to say, when I walk into a busy salon, like a busy salon, and it's humming, I mean, that energy it gets my blood going, I can't explain it. It's just like it gets your blood going. And, I sometimes I'll go through here, I'll go to like these shopping centers or stuff, and I'll kind of look at some of these salons, and they're dead. There's nobody in there. It's like, two people or one person or, it's like, I could never work in a place like that. I just God forbid you own a place like that. If you own a place like that, you're in bad shape. You know what I'm saying? But I could never work in a place like that. But when you walk into a place like my place in Pennsylvania, of course it started off slow, obviously, when we opened up. But once we were coming, it was electric. You walk in and the hair is being done, and the energy and the great cuts and great color, and the music is nice. I don't mean like blaring music. Bumble and Bumble, it was like going to a discotheque. You know what I'm saying? When Bumble, it was like walking to a discotheque. But just great music, great hair, great fashion, energy, people laughing, people having a good time. And that was one of the hardest things after COVID when I reopened my salon. That was gone. That was gone. It was, it was horrible. So I ended up closing my salon shortly thereafter. But that's another story. But so the energy, I would say, because I could walk into the salon and you just know, I just smell the success and say, this is a happening place. I know it's right, or I know it's wrong. And that's what excites me though when I see that. Knowing that I'm part of it, and knowing that I've contributed, I think, a lot in my career to helping a lot of people enjoy that. I have over 100, I have a couple hundred testimonials of people that I've helped over the years, through books or videos or classes or shows or whatever. And people I've met, like Lulu, I'm sorry, Sue, I don't think I've met you personally, but
I think once at Inner Coiffure.
Oh, really? Okay, possibly.
I think one time I did. I'm very forgettable, and I've had 3 different last names.
Well, I mean to say maybe I might know from your other last name. But my point is that over the years, the incredible people that I've met in this industry, all the people at Inner Coiffure and through Wella and Clairol and working at Bumble and Bumble. And like on my Facebook thing, I have like, I don't know, 5,000 people or something. And they're literally, a lot of them are literally people that I've met, you know what I'm saying? And I just some of them are digital friends, or call it digital friends, friends that friend you, but you don't know them. But a lot of them I know, or they send me pictures. Remember when I met you at such and such in Las Vegas in 2000, and they'll send me pictures. And that's golden to me. I think it's a wonderful thing, to be able to do that. And to know that you've helped a lot of people, I think is great.
David, in all honesty, just your energy and everything about you, you're such a wonderful ambassador for this industry. Truthfully, Lulu and I wanted to do this podcast because I think people are kind of stuck today. They just accept the status quo and they do this and they do that. And all 3 of us have had our lives probably beyond what we ever could have imagined because of the places we've gone, the people we've known, and this terrific thing called the beauty industry. Thank you for being such a great ambassador, educator, and creative person.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. That's very sweet of you to say. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being on our podcast. And can you tell the audience where they can find you?
Yeah, well, the best way to find me really is at the website where I sell my course, but I have a contact information, contact me page on there, and they can just fill out the little form and I get back to them. But so it's Velasco haircuttingsystem.com. Velasco, my last name, Velasco, haircuttingsystem.com. And like I said, if you go to the contact page and just, fill out the little thing there, a little message or whatever, and I get that, then I'll get right back to you. But absolutely, yeah, great. And I want to thank you guys for inviting me. I'm honored to be part of this. It's exciting.
Well,
like
thank
I said,
you.
it's my first podcast.
You
have so much information to share with the audience that we'll definitely would like to have you back. And I think I'm going to have this podcast done in 2 parts because there's so much information that you have given the audience that's unbelievable. And there's still more to come.
Thank you. Well, I'm always, I'm like always available. I'm game. I think it's fun. You know me, Lulu. I never close a door. You know what?
Right.
All the people you meet, all the things, I can go back to any position or people that I've met over the years and ask them for a favor or for whatever, you know what I'm saying? So I'm always available. And if I'm not, for that particular moment, obviously I'll say, well, what about this day? I'll give you an alternative.
Yeah, right.
I'm totally into it, Lulu. And I know you guys are, you wouldn't be doing this either because you don't have to do this either. You guys have paid your dues. You know what I mean? So I know as well as anybody, you guys don't have to be doing this either. You're doing it because of your love for the industry. So I respect that as well. And I think that, you're right. I think it's sad because a lot of, I get, I'm on Facebook and all these different, hairdressing groups, and so many of them are complaining about the industry and they can't get clients and they don't know how to run a salon and they're in a studio, they got to pay rent, they have no customers. I can do a whole class on all that stuff. You know what I'm saying? They need guidance. I always say, look, you need a mentor. You need somebody like I had John Chadwick and I had John and Suzanne Chadwick and I had my brother. My brother was a great inspiration. If it wasn't for my brother, guys, I never would have been a hairdresser. You know what I'm saying? And so, I had those people to look up to. And then I also had the drive to go like, you know what? I want to do that. I want to be on that stage. I want to be in Europe. I want to go traveling. I want to go to Japan. I wanted to do those things. And I came from a very low income Spanish family, and I always say we had a lot of love in my house. We had no money, So, my beauty school was $600 and I paid for it myself. I started shining shoes in a barber shop when I was 12 years old. And I saved, I bought my first car when I was 15. It was a nice little car too. And then I was a good saver and I just worked and I worked as a busboy and I did all that stuff. And I paid my own way through beauty school and everything I had, like I said, not to put my parents down, I had a lot of love, but we had no money. No extra money, I should say. Our big deal about going on vacation was going to our local beach. Like I grew up in Tampa, so we go 10 blocks down the road to the beach and go like, okay, we're on vacation. But I don't downplay that at all because I say, you know what, that gave me the drive to say, I want better. I want a nice house. I want to take my family to nice vacations and
a big sailboat, sailboat.
We got to do that ourselves. What's that?
I said, and a big sailboat.
Yeah, I wanted some nice toys, I wanted some nice toys, and those things take money. And the only way to do that is to work hard.
To work hard,
That's it.
Well, thank you so much, David, for being on our podcast. We truly, truly enjoy it, and we'll love to have you back.
Well, thank you. My pleasure, and anytime, and you guys are really honored, and it's been great. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Wow, what an episode. That wraps up another exciting edition of Artists, Icons, and Entrepreneurs. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope you're leaving inspired and ready to chase your dreams. Don't forget to follow us on social media and subscribe to our podcast so you never miss an episode over at youtube.com/artists, icons, entrepreneurs, as well as Facebook at Lulu Benavides, on IG at Lulu Benavides, at Evolve Hair Solutions as well. And don't forget to visit our website at lulubenavides.com and evolvehairsolutions.com to stay updated. Until next time, keep dreaming big, creating boldly, and making your mark on the world. Thanks for listening and take care, everyone.